Hello everybody, here we are for lesson 2 for social action theory. So we're going to continue on today with this section. Hopefully you found last lesson okay. I'm going to do a quick recap just to make sure. So last lesson we had a little look at how social action theory is different from structural theories. So if you remember, I drew those diagrams which showed how structural theories would argue that we are shaped and controlled by society, whereas action theories argue that we actually have free will. And that means, therefore, that while the structural theories would sort of argue and try and understand family life in terms of how it is shaped by society, the social action theory instead is focusing more on how we as individuals shape our own family life. So they're taking a much more micro perspective and focusing more on the individuals in the family rather than making generalizations about every family. So I started by looking at the life course analysis. Now, I realised today that I did it in kind of the wrong order in terms of like the pack, but actually I think it hopefully sort of made sense anyway, the way that I ended up doing it. And I discussed with you how the life course analysis is a different way to looking at the way that our lives kind of go through stages in comparison to a life cycle, which would have been used more in modern day society. And remember, when I say modern, I'm talking about before the 1980s. The modern era in sociology was from industrialization to the 80s. And that's when everyone would have had the same life cycle, and you can make generalizations and it would be quite predictable in terms of like the stages of family life that everyone would go through. Whereas today, Harivan, still not really sure how to say her name, argues that everybody has a different life course because of the different choices that they make, and life is a bit more of a journey. So that kind of leads us on to this idea that they focus on the micro aspects of family life, looking at meanings and choices that we make on our sort of journey through life. We looked at Beckett, who talks about the socialization process of children, but how it's also a learning process for adults too. It's not like Parsons argues, it's not just a case of adults socializing the children. The adults are learning as well through a process of trial and error. And we also looked at Clark, who argued that there are lots of different types of couple, married couple, and therefore you can't make any generalizations about. I've just shut my window, so apologies if there was a bit of noise before of like traffic and stuff. Hopefully that will stop now. So today we are going to be looking at the personal life perspective, which is really interesting. The sociology of personal life is a sort of way of studying the family and our personal lives from a social action approach, but it's quite a new thing. It was only added to the specification a couple of years ago, so it's really kind of new and contemporary sociology based on some really recent research and thoughts of sociologists. So stuff. So to introduce it, social action theorists like Harivan, who looks at the life course analysis stuff, argue that an interpretivist approach to studying the family should focus on the meanings people attach to family life and relationships over time. And this is all written in your pack. So I'm just kind of going to read through and maybe add some extra comments and annotations if you want to. Allen and Groh argue a similar thing, that until about the 60s, the family life cycle was pretty much the same for everybody. Everybody would have been in a nuclear family to start with. They would have stayed in it until they were an adult and formed their own nuclear family, and it would be very, very predictable. But that obviously today, that is not the case. People may be born into a single parent family, may be born into a reconstituted family with like step relatives that are already there, so all kinds of things. And throughout their lives, people can go through loads of different family types. In addition, Levin argues that strong social norms and social control means that the family ideal used to be promoted as a cereal packet family. So that concept of the cereal packet family is the idea that, like, in the media, through adverts and things, when you see adverts for stuff like cereal, family kind of foods and family things, the families in the adverts would all be that traditional nuclear family with the mum probably standing by the sink doing the washing up or preparing the breakfast, dad in his suit, like sitting at the table reading the paper, kids sitting there as well, as if that's kind of the norm. But actually, if you start looking at other adverts, like there was a really good advert from today, like last year, I think it was. I think it was the McCain's chips advert. I'll try and find it and send it to you. But it was an advert that kind of reflects family diversity and how things have really changed, which is what we're trying to look at. But this isn't postmodern theory. They don't think we have kind of moved into a postmodern era. They're still like a late modern theorist. But yeah, because remember that postmodernists believe we're in a postmodern society. But that's not necessarily fact. That's just what they believe. So since the 60s and 70s, there's been a huge shift in the life course due to changing laws, attitudes, and changing role of women. And again, this is all written in your pack, and you've got a question which asks you to name 4 specific family types that you think have become more common since the late 60s and the 1970s. So I want you to bear in mind here that the 70s is when women began to make their way more and more into employment due to acts like the Equal Pay Act and the Sex Discrimination Act. And this is also a time when women were now able to get a divorce from men. In the late 60s, that happened with the Divorce Reform Act. Whereas previously, the man had to be the one that would file for the divorce. Women were now the ones that could also file for divorce. So have a think about what kind of family types might develop because of that. Pause, write down a couple of ideas. Maybe discuss it if you want. Okay, hopefully you have paused. Here's some suggestions for you. So there might be more single parent families because divorce is easier and cheaper, and also because women can work and support themselves, so they don't need men, independent women. There might be more step families and reconstituted families because most people who get divorced, I think it's around 75%, they get remarried. 75% people who have been divorced are likely to get remarried. So there's likely to be a lot more step families, which we can call reconstituted families. And also there might be more cohabiting couples who are unmarried because the stigma has kind of gone, partly because of secularization and changing attitudes and things like that. People don't feel the need to get married anymore as much. They may want to, they don't feel like they have to. It's not as much of an expectation. And finally, there might be more lone person households, people choosing to just live completely on their own, which could be career women, professionals, could be anyone though, really, anyone who just decides that a family is not their kind of main priority at that time or in fact ever. Okay, so rather than the traditional theories which focus on structures and functions of the family, this new approach stresses the importance of exploring relationships, meanings, and decision-making. So I think it's a good idea here to have a think about the other theories, the other structural theories that you've been looking at. So grab a piece of paper, and if you want to just write down for me, functionalism, Marxism, feminism. And next to each of them, what is their focus? So for functionalism, they are focusing on the function of the family for individuals and to keep society going. For feminists, they're focusing on the function of the family to maintain patriarchy and the power structure, which is unequal in the family between men and women. And they're making quite a big generalization about that in terms of that all families are like that. For Marxists, they're focusing on perhaps the power inequality structure between the children and the parents and how that prepares children to be workers in the capitalist system, and also how the family functions to support capitalism. And then underneath, if you want to write down the personal life perspective, they don't care about any of that. Instead, they want to focus on things like relationships between individuals in the family, the meanings that people attach to their experience in the family, which may well be that they feel that a woman might feel that their husband has much more power than them. And it may be some of the things that structural theories are focusing on, but the personal life approach isn't kind of trying to make those big generalizations about the structure of society. Instead, they're interested in how individuals experience their own family life and how that then affects their choices, their decision making, and their experience of the family. So this means it is possible to explore a much broader range of relationships and connections that go beyond traditional family relationships. So this means that the personal life perspective, rather than only considering what we see as like traditional, the family, in terms of people you're related to by blood or people you're related to by law, which is another thing that those other theories tend to do. They focus, most of them, traditionally on the nuclear family. But this new perspective is suggesting that family has a much broader meaning than that today. So, for example, you might feel that some of your friends are more like your family than your actual family. Same-sex relationships, which aren't often through sort of like traditionally in sociology, aren't looked at that much by like traditional functionalists and Marxists. The relationships that we might feel with our relatives who've passed away, who are still very important to us, and the ways that they can still be a really big part of our lives, even if they're not around anymore, which again, the other theories would ignore, functionalism, Marxism, feminism, etc. Acquaintanceships, people who you know but you wouldn't call your friends, what kind of relationships do you have with them, how does that affect your personal life? Relationships across different households. So, you know, I don't know, your next door neighbours who you celebrate New Year's Eve with every year and go on holiday with every year, and what an important relationship that is for you. Fictive relatives is an important one. These are the people who you're not related to by blood or by law, but that you class as family. So you might have, for example, somebody in your life who's best friends with your mum and that you call Auntie Jane or whatever her name is, and you see her as like an auntie. If you watch Friday Night Dinner, Auntie Val is not their auntie, it's just their mum's best friend, but she's like an auntie to them and like a sister to Jackie. If you don't watch it, you won't know what I'm talking about, but there we go. Also, pets. Pets are obviously so important, but sociology has pretty much ignored them traditionally, but we have really strong relationships with our pets, and they really impact on family life, and also changes in the way that gender identification occurs over time and how that might impact family life too. If somebody was once your brother and becomes your sister, does that impact your personal relationship with them and your personal life? So the main characteristics of this perspective include that, as I mentioned previously, they're a late modern theory, not postmodernist. So I'm going to just say one more time again that you have got all of these theories that were created in like the modern era. Modern era is from industrialization to the 1980s, according to postmodernists. Postmodernists then argue that in the 1980s, everything changed, and now we're in a postmodern era, completely different, because everything has changed so much. But there are also late modern theories that argue that didn't happen, that argue that there have been some changes, but it hasn't changed that much. So we can still say we're in the modern era, we're just coming towards like the end of it. We're in the late modern era. So things are a bit different. There have been changes, but it's not as much as postmodernists suggest. So postmodernists say that in the 80s we've got this massive change, so we can no longer say we're in the modern era, we're now in the postmodern era. But there are some sociologists who argue things haven't changed that much, we're still in modernity, but it's just late modernity. Hope that makes sense. Send me an email if it doesn't. So postmodernists would argue that class, gender and ethnicity are not really important anymore. But again, this is a late modern theory, so they still kind of stick to those ideas of how in modern society these characteristics of class, gender and ethnicity undoubtedly do impact on our identity and our family life and personal life. They argue that people don't have as much choice in family and relationships as is suggested by postmodernists. Postmodernists argue that we have complete individual choice, but this personal life perspective argues that we don't actually have as much choice as postmodernists let on suggest. It acknowledges that the family is dynamic rather than fixed or static. So families don't stay the same. They are changing all the time. They're changing shape and structure. Power relationships change. For example, as children get older, as women get a new job, or as men lose their job, or get all kinds of things that can affect personal life. Family life is constantly changing, and there are a number of factors that can influence someone's personal life, not just the structural things like patriarchy, capitalism, etc., but really sort of micro personal things like unemployment, divorce, an accident that leads to disability, all kinds of things. So sociologists like Smart, who's a bit of a pioneer of this personal life perspective, Carol Smart, they agree that there is now more diversity within family structures, but they disagree with postmodernists such as Beck and late modernists such as Giddens. So although it is a late modern theory, as you know in sociology, there's no like right and wrong answers as such. Everybody has conflicting opinions and debate. So although Giddens is also a late modernist, they disagree with him. And this is because postmodernists argue that in society we have choice over all of our decisions. They argue that we completely pick and mix our identity. We completely choose our family based on what's good for us as individuals. And this is known as the individualism thesis, and we're going to go into that more when we look at postmodernism. But Smart argues that this isn't true, and that instead we're actually connected to other people. And although we have some choice over our situation and some like power over our situation and our personal life, we don't have complete freedom. We will consider other people that we're connected to. So I've just got a little example to kind of explain that here. In terms of like having a breakup or a divorce, in terms of the postmodern individualization thesis, a postmodern theorist would say that if somebody wants to break up with their partner because they've fallen out of love with them, they would just do it. Fallen out of love with them, not interested, see you later. And they suggest, therefore, that many people will break up with their partners. This is one of the reasons that we've seen an increase in divorces and what we call serial monogamy, where you have a partner, break up with them, have another partner, and so on. And that this is entirely their choice without any other real outside influences. But if we look at the second column, the personal life connectedness thesis argues that it's incorrect to assume that just because you fall out of love with your partner, that you'll break up with them, just being like sort of almost in a selfish way. They argue that instead of being like complete individuals, we are connected to others. So if we wanted to make a choice about leaving a partner, we wouldn't just do it just to please ourselves. We would consider all of these things like, how will it affect my partner because I still care about them and I don't want them to be upset and I need to do this in a sensitive way. And we've got a house together, who's going to have the house? We've got children, how will it affect the children? How will it affect our parents who I've built a relationship with my partner's mum and dad. Will they feel sad if I now split up with my partner? How will it affect our friendship group if we've got the same friends? Will I not have any friends anymore? Will my partner not have any friends anymore? Will I be able to afford to support my children? What will my grandma say? Would she not be very happy with me for getting a divorce, for example? Will I be able to cope with this emotionally? Will I need time off work? What will my colleagues think? So this personal life connectedness thesis says that it's incorrect to assume that we are just selfish individuals who just think, I'm done with this relationship, therefore it's over. That's not true. We actually are connected to lots of other people and lots of other things, which would mean that that decision is influenced by connections. So a couple of things then. This is on the next page in your pack. Sorry, I've lost track of what page we're on, but it's at the top of one of the pages. So Nordquist and Smart, Nordquist and Smart, I'm not sure. The personal life approach stresses the importance of non-biological relations, and then you've got a little space there to write some examples. And it would be great if you could write examples from your own life. So it might be like your best friend or your mum's best friend, or step families, or I don't know, anyone in your life who's important to you but not biologically related. Mitchell says that throughout your life, memories shape your identity and your decisions. So a good example of this would be things like if you have a memory of a really happy childhood where your mum and dad were really great and got on really well, and you had like a traditional nuclear family, happy, blah, blah, then you might feel that might influence your decision to then get married and have children when you're older. But if your memories are not so good, then that might also have an impact in terms of you might not want to get married from fear of divorce, or it might go the other way, that you want to have children so that you can raise them better than you felt you were. Could be any of those things. But your memories of your personal life shape then your own personal life going forwards. Tipper argues that children's interpretation of what counts as family might include pets. And again, you might want to give an example from your own life. And Tipper also says that children really choose who they see as their family. And it's really, really common for children to see like the children next door that they play with every day after school as like family to them. And they may be closer to them than they are to their cousins who live like a couple of miles away, for example. So how are these approaches above different to the previous theories of family life? They move away from our traditional notions of what the family is. They take into account individuals' thoughts, feelings, and experiences, and kind of recognise that we actually have choice in the matter in terms of who. Okay, so we're going to start looking at a couple of other key thinkers. We've looked at quite a few in terms of giving you like a couple of sentences on them. But what I would suggest is if you're going to remember one, Carol Smart is the main one to remember, most important one, most influential one in terms of the personal life perspective. If you're going to remember two, Morgan, who we're going to look at next, is a good one. But yeah, Carol Smart is the main gal for personal life perspective. So, Carol Smart, become very frustrated with sociologists like postmodernists arguing that people are just individuals and selfish and therefore don't really care very much about their family anymore, and that people are not committed to the family. There's been this like trend in sociology which suggests that the family's kind of broken down and isn't important anymore, and that people aren't as committed to it. They will just leave it, for example, if they're not happy. And Smart says that this isn't true. Smart has suggested many new concepts which will help sociologists study the personal life. So I've got them just on a bullet pointed list here. Once I've talked through each one, make sure you pause the video, read about it in your pack, and answer any questions and make any additional notes that you think help you to understand it. So firstly, she says that memories are really important when we are studying people's experiences of the personal life, because you remember things which are important to you. So if as a researcher, let's say, I asked you to tell me your earliest memory of family life, pause the video if you want to, have a think about it, then whatever that memory is probably quite a clear indication of how you view your family life. So if it's like a really happy family holiday, that might be how you view your childhood and how you kind of see your personal life and family life. So we remember things that are important to us, and therefore memory is really important in understanding our experiences of personal life. Smart also argues we should use biographical methods, which means that we should look at individual lives as a whole from the perspective of the individuals. Let them tell you what's important to them. Similar thing to the memory point, really, that it's about how individuals perceive their own life and what things they see are as important to their personal life. Embeddedness is the next concept, and this kind of relates to the ways that as individuals we are embedded in like a timeline, a historical timeline. There were family members before us and there'll be family members after us, and we're just one part of a massive web of connectedness with people who are not even around anymore and people who've not even been born yet. So we're just one kind of small part embedded in personal lives of others. Relationality is similar but slightly different. This is more kind of referring to the ways that we are connected to others and that informs our identity. So we might be a sister, a friend, a cousin, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever. And that influences all of our decisions, and that also influences our experience of the personal life. Interesting one, the last one, the imaginary, is really relevant, I think, particularly in today's society, because this is referring to the idea that we have in our heads of what family life or the personal life should be like. And therefore, we might do things, our families might do things that they just think families should do, like sitting at the table all together to have dinner, for example, because that's what families should do, or having some family time at the weekend and going out for a walk, because we feel that that's what families should do. And this is even more relevant when you think about social media, because we probably post online personal relationships that we think we should have and that we think people will see positively, and they may not be realistic. So what we imagine and want our family life and our personal life to be like is just as important as what it actually is, according to Smart, because this reflects what we want from our personal life. So this is something that Liz has come up with, I think, to help you remember those 5 things. Mary Berry eats raspberry ice cream, and Mary Berry is a bit of a queen of like family baking and stuff, isn't she? So maybe that will help you remember. I just think that raspberry ice cream looks very delish. Morgan, next, last key thinker for personal life perspective. Slightly more simple than Smart's 5-pronged approach. Morgan argues that family practices are important to our identity within the family. So this means that the way you feel part of your family and the way that you feel that you belong to your family is via the things that you physically do in the family. So you might be the person who empties the dishwasher, takes the bins out, fixes the IT problems, the person that gives good hugs, the person that always does the music for family gatherings, the person who asks everyone round for lunch on a Sunday, and that it's these practices, these things that we do, which make us feel like part of our family and give us our like personal identity in the family. So it would be really good if you could take a few minutes now to think about what family practices give you your identity within your family. What is it that you personally do that makes you sort of feel like part of your family and that gives you a role in your family? And you should probably all have something. It might take you a while to think about it, but there's probably something that your family all know you for and that is your role within the family. Okay, a couple of things then to evaluate this social action approach. Firstly, that it is really useful in that it is a micro approach, unlike all of the other theories, and it's detailed and in-depth, personal, individual, high in validity. So this, as kind of like a new approach, is useful because it contributes things that other theories haven't. It contributes these kind of more detailed micro insights into family life. And also, you've got a hint question in your pack which says, what does this approach recognise that other perspectives ignore? And as I say, that is the individual meanings and motives behind our personal life decisions and our experiences of the personal life. Whereas functionalists just think about the functions for sort of society. Marxists focus on bigger scale things and how capitalism is influenced. Feminism starts sometimes to look at the experiences of individual women, and it's starting to, like more recently, with intersectional feminism. But social action approach is the first approach really that starts to look at individuals. However, it's not necessarily useful on its own, because if you're only focusing on the micro, then you're ignoring the macro stuff. You're ignoring the stuff like patriarchy as a huge power structure in the whole of society, capitalism, etc. Some people might argue that it's too subjective, so it's really like open to bias and open to interpretation. If someone just tells you their memories and then you try and kind of interpret from that what their family life is like, then there's room for error. And that means also that you're unable to identify patterns and trends and make correlational things. So this kind of approach wouldn't be favoured by positivists, and it would be highly unreliable. In terms of generalizability, if you're doing a micro study in this kind of way that is so micro that it's really focusing on like one person at a time, really, you cannot generalize that. Interesting thing to note, though, that it's not trying to make a generalization. It's saying we can't make generalizations, we shouldn't aim to. However, a positivist or a more macro theorist might say, well, what's the point if you can't make generalizations to everyone in society? Social action theorists might respond by saying, we don't need to, we don't want to, we want to understand individuals. Positivists would say, well, that's stupid, and so on. So yes, that's what we're going to kind of leave it as for today. However, you have just got some consolidation things to do to check your understanding. So you've got a key concepts list, key thinkers list, and then just like there's a space to just summarise each of the different approaches within social action. So like the life course analysis, the personal life perspective, something else, I can't remember what the third one is. And next lesson, what I would like to do is address any concerns that you have. So please email me with any questions you've got about this whole like social action approach. And I'm also going to look at some short exam questions with you, maybe via video, maybe not, I'm not sure, see how I feel. Okay, thanks very much everyone, hope you enjoyed, and I will see you, well, who knows, speak to you soon, bye.